Paris, 1885. The city of light, of art, of revolution stood still. Not because of war, nor politics, nor plague, but for the funeral of a writer. But this wasn't just any writer. It was Victor Hugo, the man whose words moved empires, shook cathedrals, and gave voice to the forgotten. On the day he died, Paris didn't just mourn. It transformed. And in a moment almost too surreal to be true, something unheard of happened. Even the brothels closed. Yes, the bordellos of Paris, those ever-buzzing, ever-open sanctuaries of lust, shut their velvet-draped doors out of respect for one man. But why? Why would a profession so deeply woven into Parisian nightlife, so openly defiant of moral judgment, halt everything for a funeral? To understand, you have to understand who Victor Hugo was and what he meant to the people no one else cared about. Hugo wasn't just a novelist. He was a force of nature, the kind of writer whose pen felt more like a sword. Born in 1802, he grew up watching France twist itself through monarchy, revolution, empire, and back again. But unlike many men of letters, Hugo didn't retreat into safe salons and polite fiction. He plunged straight into the fire. And from that fire, he gave the world some of the most powerful literature ever written. Les Misérables, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, stories of beggars, thieves, revolutionaries, and prostitutes. Characters that other authors ignored or ridiculed. He gave them names, hearts, and hope. In Les Misérables, he wrote the tragic life of Fantine, a young mother forced into prostitution to save her child. He didn't treat her with scorn. He wrote her with sorrow and dignity, showing readers the crushing weight of poverty and the indifference of society. He made the voiceless human. In a time when the poor were treated like shadows, Hugo used his novels to hold up a mirror and dared the rich to look.
Please do well to like and subscribe to this channel if you haven't, as an encouragement for more of this kind of content.
And people listened. He wasn't just loved, he was worshipped. When Hugo spoke, France held its breath. His novels were bestsellers, but his politics were louder. He was exiled for opposing Napoleon III. He stood up for the oppressed, the jailed, the enslaved. He fought for the abolition of the death penalty, for free education, for press freedom, and for the rights of the working class. So when Victor Hugo died on May 22nd, 1885, at the age of 83, France didn't just lose a writer. It lost a conscience. And Paris knew this wasn't going to be a quiet goodbye. More than 2 million people flooded the streets of the city. 2 million. That's more than the population of Paris at the time. Crowds stretched from the Arc de Triomphe to the Panthéon. They weren't just politicians and artists. They were factory workers, beggars, prostitutes, ex-cons, orphans, the very people Hugo had spent his life defending. The government tried to claim his body, his legacy, his message. But the people, they knew better. This man had fought for them when no one else did. And that's when it happened. Word began to spread through the streets. Even the brothels had gone dark. For one day, the red lights went out. Curtains were drawn. Music stopped. The scent of perfume and sweat was replaced by silence and grief. Not because the state demanded it, not because of police raids, but because the women themselves, the madams, the dancers, the girls who walked the streets, chose to stop. They knew what Victor Hugo had done for them. He hadn't just written about their suffering. He had exposed the cruelty of a system that drove women to sell their bodies to survive. He gave their pain a name. He made it matter. And so, in a gesture more powerful than any statue or speech, they gave him what they rarely received themselves: respect. Picture it. A city known for sin, pausing for sorrow. a man carried through the streets by his people, cheered and wept for by those he had never met but had always loved through his words. Victor Hugo's coffin was placed in the Panthéon, the resting place of France's greatest. But his real monument was the silence that fell across the streets that day, the pause in pleasure, the reverent hush of rebellion. For one final moment, the entire city, high and low, stood united, not in sin or shame, but in honor. And maybe, just maybe, in that brief silence, Hugo heard them. Not the cheers of statesmen, not the praise of critics, but the whispered thanks of the very people whose lives he'd spent a lifetime telling the world not to ignore. Victor Hugo didn't just shut down the brothels. He made the forgotten unforgettable.